Welcome to my video. Guys, I've recorded this intro like a million times and I just can't seem to get it right. I think I'm off my game. All right, this week I'm sharing two recipes. The theme of the week is tomato soup. So I'm going to share one recipe today, one recipe on Thursday. I've just been lacking in creativity when it comes to my meal prep and cooking. I have a little collection of cookbooks that I like to consult from time to time. This is one of my favorites, the Canadian Living Vegetarian Cookbook. Pranav gave it to me a couple years ago. I bookmarked all these recipes and I never made a single thing. And this week I just pulled it out and I was really inspired to try something. I came across two really beautiful recipes for tomato soup. The first is a creamy tomato soup recipe, and it's not your tomato soup that comes out of a can, but it does use canned whole tomatoes. You see what I did there? All right. The next is tomato vegetable soup with halloumi, and this uses canned diced tomatoes. And you know, sometimes living in Canada, our produce in the winter isn't the best. We just need to rely on canned ingredients. Anyway, this soup here, the vegetable soup with halloumi, is going to come out on Thursday. So don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Make sure that you have notifications turned on so that when this comes out on Thursday, you don't miss it. Today we are going to work on the creamy tomato soup. All right. Okay, I'm done with the intro. That wasn't too bad. I don't know, I feel like I've just been off my game lately. Anyway, let's get into it. Before we get into the recipe, I do want to mention something about the ingredients because this is indeed called the creamy tomato soup and I am using whipping cream. But if you are vegan, you should use another cream that you're comfortable with, like cashew cream or coconut cream. Same goes for the butter. Use some Earth Balance or some vegan Becel. There's some good options out there and I'm sure you know exactly what to use instead of butter. So let's melt that butter or non-butter in a large stock pot over medium heat. And while that butter is melting, here are the next two ingredients, some onions and garlic. I have 2 onions sliced up and a couple of cloves of garlic just roughly diced. It really doesn't need to be perfect because we're going to be blending this soup up in the end, so don't worry too much about it. The onions go into the melted butter and they need to cook on medium-low heat until they go through the various phases of becoming translucent and then becoming golden. That's going to take about 4 to 5 minutes, so just hang in there. It'll happen. You'll see the color change. Once that happens, you can add in the garlic and continue cooking this for another minute. And only 2 spices in this soup, if you can imagine, some dried red chili flakes and a little bit of black pepper. That's it. No, this is not going to make your soup spicy, it's just going to flavor it really nicely. Next comes some tomato paste, and I would urge you not to omit this ingredient because it's going to add a depth of flavor that simply isn't present in canned tomatoes. And I do like that this recipe uses canned tomatoes. I think that in this case, canned is probably better than fresh, but definitely don't omit the paste because it adds a richness that just isn't there in canned tomatoes. All right, we're going to balance out some of the acidity with a little bit of sugar, and believe it or not, I'm not going to be adding any extra salt to this recipe because the canned tomatoes that I used contain salt, and this vegan soup base, or if you were using a veggie bouillon cube, that would contain salt as well. So I don't really need to add salt. But if you were using veggie stock without salt, or if you were using reduced sodium canned tomatoes, then you might need to add a little bit of salt. I think the best thing is probably to just taste as you go and adjust if necessary. Moving on, you're going to bring this up to a boil, then turn it down to a simmer and allow it to cook for 50 minutes, no less. Just forget about it, make a cup of tea, read some chapters of your book, and then come back to it and blend it up until it is smooth. I'm using an immersion blender so I can just blend it up right away. I don't have to wait for it to cool down, but if you're using a regular blender, I would recommend doing this in batches and allowing it to cool a little bit first. Once it's nice and smooth and you've gotten rid of all the big chunks of tomatoes, it's time to add your whipping cream or any other cream that you might be using. The original recipe, which is down below, by the way, in case you forgot, called for 1/3 cup of cream, but I only used 1/4 cup of cream, to be honest. I think it produced a really delicious soup and I definitely got the creamy flavor. I even reserved a little bit of cream to drizzle on top afterwards. So I didn't really use as much as the recipe suggested, but I can only imagine how much more delicious it would be with the right amount of cream. That original recipe actually recommended garnishing with some almond and basil pesto, which I did not go to the trouble of making, but I'll put that recipe down below for you anyways, in case you want to try the correct garnish. I got a little inspired, I want to say, maybe carried away is the right term, with that toothpick, just trying to make a beautiful pattern, but you know, whatever. You don't have to do that. You don't have to be crazy like me. Just drizzle the cream, drizzle the pesto, whatever. And here it is, a delicious creamy tomato soup for you to try with canned tomatoes. I hope you like this recipe. Thanks for spending time with me. And don't forget that there is another recipe coming up on Thursday. So hit the subscribe button. That way you won't miss it. And it's another tomato soup, but it's completely different from this one. So you don't want to miss it. All right. Thanks so much. And I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.